Roger Talbott, welcome to the Plant Yourself podcast.
Well, thank you, Howie. It's really good to see you.
Yeah, likewise. So I'd love for you we're going to talk about COVID and long COVID and the things that you've done and you've learned and experienced. But first, I'd love to find out like who you were before COVID. You had to give us a brief bio.
Well, I was a United Methodist minister for 45 years and retired in 2017. And I started really rebuilding my body about the time I retired. I had, especially in the last decade or so, it was a really stressful time, and I became I was dealing with irritable bowel syndrome, especially, and uh, and really during the time after the years after I retired, um, I was learning about how to deal with that particular thing, and by 2019, my wife Jackie and I had moved from Ohio, where we had lived for most of those 45 years, um, to New York City, close to our son and his family. And we and I really began to rebuild my body. I joined a gym. I was learning to run, and even thinking about um, competing with some 5Ks. In the fall of 2019, I was thinking, well, maybe in the spring,
Hmm.
I could I could get to a point where I wouldn't be totally embarrassed to run in my age group. and
And can
but
I ask
then
how old you are?
Oh yeah, I'm almost 70. I'll be 75 in August,
Gotcha.
and so yeah, and I felt good about being in my 70s and being able to um, to do this kind of thing. Um, and and then in December of 2019, I got this strange flu. Um, it wasn't life threatening at any point, but I was congested. I had a fever. I was, um, just wiped out in terms of energy. I spent a lot of time in bed, just lying around and sleeping, um, and had some of the same digestive issues that I had when I had uh, IBS, and so I thought, I wonder what this is. It was lasting for weeks at a time. I consulted my physician, but I figured, well, it's the flu, and it'll go away eventually, which it eventually did, but it took about 6 weeks. And um, the problem with saying I had long COVID is that was December of 2019. The first official case in the United States wasn't registered until I think the end of January of
Hmm.
2020. And in New York City, the first official case I think was in early February of 2020. And um, and of course, there weren't any COVID tests at that time. And by the time there were even antigen tests, so many months had passed since I'd had it that for most people, the antigens weren't showing up in these tests anyway. So I can't, I can't prove that I had long COVID, but if I, just telling anybody who's had COVID what I had, they'd say, "Oh, you had
Yeah.
COVID."
If I were the prosecutor, I'd rip you to shreds right now, right?
Right, exactly. Right. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so, but I don't qualify for any kind of study really, because I can't prove I had COVID. But that's the case with almost everybody who had COVID in that first uh, trimester of months that uh, in 2020, and it does, as I understand it, perhaps a higher percentage of those folks have long COVID than in any other group.
Mm,
It was the before the virus had changed and perhaps become a little less uh, bad than it was right at the beginning. And it was
right.
killing a lot of people right at the beginning. So at any rate, uh, after I recovered, and it took a long time to recover that winter, I began, I started having, I started feeling more like my old self, the person who was running. But the strange thing was that as I would exert myself, I would put myself back. I would get uh, more fatigue, more brain fog, um, and and have some unpleasant digestive consequences. And in the and eventually became clear as I was learning more. People were talking more about long COVID, that I was suffering from what they call the post-exertional malaise, which is, I guess, doctor talk for feeling like crap.
Hmm.
and,
That's Methodist minister
and,
talk.
but I just I feel uh, but that just went on, and I didn't get what to do about that.
Uh-huh. So
All,
here was this
yeah,
this sort of 6 week, sort of extreme setback. But a lot of us, runners, people who have kind of, put training on our calendars, and we're very acutely aware of like where I am. Am I doing better than last month? We'll keep charts. So we can get sick or we can sprain an ankle, and we understand that there's a setback. But then we're all really eager to, okay, let me get back up. Oh, it's the 10-minute mile is harder now. I can't go as hard, but I know how to get back. I
exactly.
know how to climb the mountain again. And you were discovering
Yep.
that every single time you worked out, instead of putting something into a deposit, it was actually another withdrawal.
Exactly. Because you're used to, giving 100%, and it may not, as you say, it may not be what you were able to do before the illness or the accident. But if you do that every time you go out, you can do more the next time. And this was working backwards. I was worse off by exerting myself, and I just really did not know what to do with that. Um, and there were times when this post exertional malaise would go on for weeks at a time. I mean, I really was. Um, I'd be down in bed for 3, 4, 5 days, and then just not able to do much for another 5 days, and then gradually start feeling better. And then when I felt better, then I would go out and exert myself,
Hmm. So how,
and then the cycle would start.
yeah.
Yeah.
So how, aside from your athletic pursuits, how did this post-exertional malaise affect the rest of your life?
No, as a big piece of it was brain fog. The I was I was unable to concentrate. Um, I could do. I had about 2 good hours in the morning after I got up, and I would do some writing and do some serious reading. Um, but as the day went on, I really just couldn't do a lot to think a lot, and that affected me, especially because I wear two cochlear implants, and which are wonderful. Um, but I basically hear by interpreting digital signals that are going into that are stimulating my cochlea, stimulating the auditory nerve inside the cochlea, and it took me several months when I was first implanted to learn how for my brain to hear that as sound, and it takes some energy on my brain's part to do that kind of hearing. So even under the best of circumstances, long conversations or um, conversations with people in noisy environments are very tiring, and um, and this just exacerbated that. So having a long conversation with Jackie, my wife, or with my children and grandchildren or friends, all of that would wear me out very quickly. It was also the period of time when everything was being done on Zoom and or on some kind of video conferencing, and even social things, social gatherings, and that seemed to take even more energy. So I was uh, I was really debilitated um, by social interactions,
Hmm. Yeah.
and yeah,
Yeah,
go
and
ahead.
at a
Yeah.
time when social interactions, like everybody, we were all like deprived of social interactions. And, I'm imagining that there were things that, well, let's go for a couple of months, like we can meet in the park, or we
Right.
can be in a public, a wide open space. And like, I must have been hard for you to not be able to participate in those, or get there and be so fatigued you couldn't experience it.
Exactly. It was really hard. Yeah, uh, it was lonely, and so yeah, we that had been that during especially the early days was it was very isolating.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
when did
and
yeah, when did you start to um, wonder what was going on and start looking around? Because nobody knew
well,
anything when you first had this experience.
right, right. Nobody knew anything at first, and then I began to hear about um, long COVID. There's again, the doctors have something about sequential. I can't even remember the doctor term for SARS,
Hmm.
COVID, sequelae, something or other. Um, but uh, I began to wonder as the summer came of 2020, and I, I guess it was no, it was later in the year because I was able to have a face to face conversation with my physician and asked him about it, and he didn't think there was such a thing.
Hmm.
Um, uh, but then he thought perhaps I was suffering from cognitive decline or something, given my age especially, and sent me to a neurologist.
How did it
One of his
feel? How
colleagues
did it
was a
feel to hear that?
oh my gosh. Well, my mom had Alzheimer's. Both her sisters had Alzheimer's. Her mom, my grandmother had Alzheimer's. So I was waking up every morning worried that I did indeed have cognitive decline, and his hunch didn't didn't relieve that anxiety, that's for sure.
Mm.
Um, but I went to the neurologist, and the neurologist said, gave me some tests. He said, "No, you don't have Alzheimer's." He said, and he said, "I see 5 to 7 people a week who are describing the same symptoms, and he says, we don't have any idea how to treat this." He says, "We can throw some things at it. We can give you Ritalin, for example, but I wasn't ready for that, and he wasn't. He didn't think it was something. It was something he wanted to do if I did, unless I really wanted it. So, but being told that was incredibly helpful, to have somebody wearing a white coat validate um, that whatever I had
Mhm.
isn't normal, and it isn't Alzheimer's, um, and um and I'm not crazy. And so um, that was really, really helpful.
Mhm. So when did you first hear about this thing called long COVID?
Well, it was in that time, and that was what I was asking my physician about and asking the neurologist about. And again, the neurologist validated that. He says there's something out there. And again, this is New York City, and he was seeing, as I said, as he said, he was seeing several people a week who have had similar symptoms. So they were beginning to see um, a syndrome, and it was beginning to be in the newspapers and that sort of thing. So that was how I really encountered it. Was through the press that um, people were talking about this, that they had COVID, they got over it, and but 3, 4, 6 months later, they were still suffering from a lot of the same symptoms, and um, so I began to become part of online communities that discussed long COVID, um, and especially people who were um, looking at research into long COVID, and really have spent a lot of time on that. Um, just looking at videos and reading papers by people who were studying long COVID.
Mhm. So I imagine in in these communities at first, like there's still a lot of controversy around long COVID. There's articles that have come out in the past couple of months saying that maybe it's not really a thing, or almost nobody has it, or it's not as big a deal. Like, what was the tenor of those communities that are saying, like, we've got something and there's no mainstream acknowledgement of it?
Well, I there were some communities, especially Facebook groups, that I did not find helpful because people were, you know, complaining, but there wasn't anybody offering any kind of help, really. It was just, oh, yeah, we get you, which is helpful to some people. It wasn't helpful to me.
Yeah.
Um, I um, what I discovered was that there were people in different medical disciplines who were looking at it through the lenses of their particular discipline. Um, there were specialists in blood who were finding microclots. There were people who were finding um, parts of the original virus still in the gut. Um, there were people, especially neurologists, who were discovering that the brain was, in many people, kind of overreacting to things. So it was beginning to look like an autoimmune disease. It was beginning to look like something left over from the virus itself, um, and just being a layperson, I couldn't necessarily evaluate all these arguments. But what I was getting over time was that what I could do for myself probably had to dealing with healing my gut.
Mm.
that apparently the gut is the first line of protection in the immune system. And because I had damaged my gut so much through the years and wound up with irritable bowel syndrome, I still had I still had a long ways to go to make my gut as healthy as possible.
Mm. So, I mean, you approached it, looking at the gut and at food. Was that a common thing? I mean, because I imagine when Western medicine doesn't have something for a group of people, they can get very creative about trying things. I'm wondering what were some of the other things before we get to what you did and and how it worked. I'm like curious, like what other because we know there was ivermectin and bleach and all sorts of
Right,
stuff.
right.
What were some
Yeah.
of the putative cures being bandied around in these groups?
Well, there were people who were suggesting a kind of running your blood through a filter of some sort. Apparently, this was being done in Europe, especially in Germany, and that would cleanse it of the microclots. And there were people who had this done and were saying, "Yeah, this seemed to help."
Mm.
Um, there were there were a lot of people, and these were serious researchers. They weren't just people who were trying to make a buck,
Mm-hmm.
who were talking about dysfunctions of the autonomic nervous system, because a lot of people, and I had some of this, where they were not, their balance was off. They when you stand up, you feel like you're fainting, that kind of thing. Um, and so there were people who were trying to teach people how to live with that and maybe make that more functional. Um, the um, there were experiments and continue to be experiments with Paxlovid and Ritalin and some of the other drugs that are out there, um, but none of that kind of leaped out as something. First of all, that I could even do. Just a few people in a few places were working on this, and they had more patients than they could handle, and so I think partly focusing on the gut was just because it's available.
Mm.
Anybody can do it.
Uh-huh. So what did you know or think or believe about what you could do for your gut?
Um, I had really good experiences with plant-based eating in healing my irritable bowel syndrome, and I'm very, very fortunate to be married to somebody who cares an awful lot about health and has studied as much as she possibly can about how to be healthy, and has gotten into especially the whole foods plant-based community, and has read books by Dr. Esselstyn and Colin Campbell, who I think you know pretty well, and other kinds of folks in that community, and one of the things that I did for the irritable bowel syndrome that seemed to help also with the long COVID was drink um, green smoothies, um, because it's an easy way to hyper nourish my body, and followed a lot of advice from Dr. Brooke Goldner about that. So and so all of that seemed to help. It wasn't a cure, but it was. I felt like I was feeling better by doing those kinds of things.
Mm. Okay. So, um, how much better? Like, what did you notice?
That's that's a tough question because I I through that first year um, of 2020, 2021, I guess it was the first couple of years, I very gradually got better, enough better so that I was doing a little bit of running and um, and some home, basic body weight training for strength. Um, but then my son had us to his house for to celebrate his mom's birthday in November of 2021, and we uh, and he had a new bottle of whiskey, and I drank a small glass of whiskey, which I hadn't had any alcohol in a very long time, and and uh, and I was terribly sick the next day, and for some reason that took me all the way back to where I was um, the previous year, and so um, and so I went through all the steps that I had been doing, um, and the I guess it was in 2020, because in 2021 in December of 2021, I went um, to True North Health Center and did a 20-day fast, and and uh, that took away that finally took away some of the worst of the digestive issues and began to heal my stomach.
Hmm. So a 20-day fast. Um,
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
when you reached out to them, I know they have a long research history on high blood pressure.
Mhm.
I know Colin Campbell's wife Karen went into remission of a cancer. Um, they didn't know much. I mean, nobody knew much about COVID. Did they say we can help you, or we think we can, or give it a try, or do they try to dissuade you?
It's one of the best conversations I ever had. Dr. Goldhammer uh, talked to me before I went, and I told him what I was dealing with, and he said, um, "Well, we can try it. If it works, we can pretend we knew what we were doing."
How'd you
and
feel when you heard that?
um,
Did that inspire confidence or the opposite?
it actually did. I thought, okay, this guy is not. This guy is the real deal. He's perfectly honest, um, and it did. It made a big difference in uh, at the first level, which was the digestive issues that I was having. I just had diarrhea a lot with so many different things that were setting it off, including that small glass of whiskey, and and I so I and the fasting really seemed to take care of that. It did not take care of the fatigue, and it did not take care of the brain fog.
Mm,
But the diarrhea had pretty much disappeared.
gotcha. So how did it end up being 20 days? Was that the plan from the beginning, or was it a, sort of a day-by-day
Well, it was
assessment?
that was kind of the plan from the beginning, but also a day by day assessment. At True North, you're visited by a physician every morning and by somebody who takes your vitals every day, um, and and usually somebody takes your vitals in the afternoon as well. And so there's a constant. You're constantly um, observed as you're going through this fast. And and in this fast, I just drank water, um, and I had at that time I had some weight to lose, not a lot of weight, but some, and um, I and so I made it through that 20 day 20-day fast. It was tough at the end, but I did make it.
Uh-huh.
It's a it's not easy.
Well, what's it like?
Well, it's mostly a it's mostly um, lying around a lot because you don't have any energy. Some people do. Some people have because they have enough weight to lose. Their bodies go into ketosis, and I think that's the right term. And they're burning that fat, and it provides every gram of fat's worth, um, lots of energy, and I guess 9 calories of energy. I think if I remember correctly, and so so they have quite a lot of energy. I didn't.
Mm.
I didn't experience that. um, so yeah, my wife had done this. Had done the fast um, about a year earlier, and so she had a good experience, and so that was why I did it.
Gotcha. So, we're talking about sort of the physical aspects, but it certainly must have been an emotional roller coaster as well. What were you happy about the True North outcome the first time, or disappointed that you still?
I was really happy with the outcome, and I felt um, yeah, I felt like it was worth it. I was disappointed and discouraged by the fact that I still had this post-exertional malaise. I wasn't able um, to get myself rebuilt, and it was and I was working with you as a coach, as and I had come across a strategy that was being within this community of people who are dealing with long COVID that was being uh, recommended, which was called pacing, um, and it means trying to just discern what about 80% of full exertion would be, and to stay within that, and to not push to 100%. And that did help in allowing me to do some things, be somewhat active, but and not put myself back into real terrible fatigue and brain fog
Hmm.
um, the days afterwards. Um, but that was not easy. And as I said, working with you helped a lot in terms of trying to discern that, but it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. Well, in our work together, my sense of you was that, when somebody is living in poverty, they spend a lot of their time thinking about money in ways that people who have more money don't. And it kind of felt like that way with your energy, like you were constantly spending mental energy figuring out how to parse and save and spend your energy.
Exactly. That is exactly the truth. I've done. I have lived in poverty, and I know exactly what that's like, and I know that. And you're right. I was constantly thinking about how much does this cost me in terms of my energy, thinking ahead, that we might have a family gathering, for example, and so the day before, I would I would take it easy. I wouldn't go for a walk. I would lie down and take naps through the day, and perhaps take a nap earlier in the day before the family gathering, just so I would have the energy to be present with my family.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I was constantly doing that.
Yeah. So as a Methodist minister, was there any sort of conversations with divinity around this? Whether, in Elizabeth Kubler-Ross sort of five stages of, bargaining, denial, anger, um, it was,
Yeah, it's yeah, and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was the first to admit that those were artificial stages.
yeah.
And people go into them and then come back out of them and try again. I mean, that was, yeah, it's the whole thing has been a really challenging and helpful in some ways in terms of spiritual growth. Uh, Looking back on it now, um, uh, I have had to let go of images of myself, um, as as a how active I am. Um, uh, I've had to wrestle with the social, cultural idea of what it means to age.
Hmm.
Um, because one of the temptations has been to just say, ah, I'm just getting old, and there's no cure for that. And um, I'm just going to lie around for the rest of my life. Um, and that that's a that's a that's a dangerous temptation, a hard one to wrestle with. Um, the I just came across something I wrote in my journal in the midst of that time, that there's the temptations are the three S's, to be uh, selfish, separate, and sad.
Hmm.
Um, and I think anyone dealing with a chronic illness has to work on those temptations, and the counters to those temptations, if I remember correctly, are um, connection, um, compassion, and um, um, gratitude, I think. But I thought they were three C's, but I can't come up with. But gratitude is certainly a synonym.
Right. um, I mean, when I see those three words together, selfish, separate, and sad, that kind of reminds me of our culture, right? That
Yeah,
long COVID
yeah, yeah.
is kind of an extreme visitation You know, like the
Yeah,
plague, the plague isn't that different from the base state.
it's really true, and and I think, and I wonder at times whether long COVID is a symptom of a larger ill health in the culture. The poet and writer Wendell Berry says that the real measure of health is the health of an entire community,
Hmm.
and and um, um, and it's not just individuals within that community. It's not just people in that community. It's all the living things in the community, and um, and I think that a lot of what is going on in our culture, um, including the gun violence and high rates of suicide, high rates of deaths by despair, all of that probably can be traced really back to those three S's, and especially the idea of separation. Our emphasis on individualism has not served us well.
Yeah. So as you were, coming to these spiritual realizations through this wrestling, and especially around the separateness, you have a
Mm-hmm.
disease that is a condition that is keeping you separate because you don't have the energy to engage. We're in a prolonged lockdown of one sort or another where social things have stopped happening. How did you seek connection in those under those circumstances?
Um, well, that's a really good question, because when I was really suffering from the malaise of brain fog and fatigue and digestive stuff, um, I just I really didn't want to be around people, and and but I knew that wasn't good for me, so I did. Um, uh, and my wife and I'm again, I give so much credit to my wife, Jackie, because is she's a wonderful community builder, and we uh, we had just moved here to New York, so we'd only lived here for about a year and a half before I got long COVID. But in that time, we built some communities. We had a meditation group that we met with every week. We joined a church. Um, we I had our our family that already lived here, and my daughter-in-law is a is a rabbi, so she had a community, that her congregation, that we were also part of, and that still are a part of, and so we knew quite a lot of people, and again, using Zoom in that lockdown time, we we kept up with a lot of those folks, and um, um, and I did prioritize as much as I could those times of connection with with family and friends. Um, we um, and as things opened up and we were able to meet face to face with people, we we've maintained those communities. It's really important to have communities, and again, I think our individualism, that's summed up in the book title "Bowling Alone," is a has not served us well. I think we have not created a culture where there are a lot of places for people to find community, and Um, whereas when I was growing up, a lot of people belonged to bowling leagues, and just that kind of thing uh, meant that people had communities, they had friends, they had people who looked for them every week and wanted to keep up with each other's stories. And it's so so yeah, I think the loneliness and the loneliness that I know so many are experiencing with long COVID and with other chronic illnesses is partly a function of the way our culture is functioning.
Hmm. So this isn't the end of your health story yet, right? So
No,
so
right. That's
so let's
correct. That's correct.
continue after after you came back from True North in December
Yeah.
2021. Your gut symptoms are
Hmm.
much better, but there's still the brain fog and post exertional malaise. So take
Hmm.
us forward in time.
So I through 2021, I kept trying to do more physically, take hikes with Jackie, but I was still not able to do nearly as much as I wanted to do, and I still was running out of energy in the late afternoon, early evening, and I'd have to go to bed. And I realize that even more now than I did then, that I was still struggling with brain fog. I wasn't thinking as clearly. I didn't. It was harder for me to do to write. It was harder for me to be really engaged in conversations, um, and and problem solve, all of that kind of thing. Um, and then a very odd thing happened. We actually made this decision to go, we decided to go back to True North, both of us, Jackie and I. So we made reservations for March of 2023, just 2 months ago. Um, but in that time, Yom Kippur happened, and Yom Kippur is the Jewish is a Jewish holiday on which Jews who observe it fast. They fast for 24 hours from the evening before Yom Kippur until the end of the services on the evening of Yom Kippur. And I was going to go to my daughter-in-law's services, so I decided to fast. And the day after Yom Kippur, I felt so much better.
Hmm.
And I thought, I wonder what that's about. And so the next week, I tried another 24-hour fast, and I felt better. And after a couple of weeks, I was doing a couple of fasts a week, uh, to and that was improving. And so I was very much excited about doing the fast at another fast at True North Health Center. Again, that was largely because Jackie kept suggesting that since it worked somewhat the first time, it might be really good for me the second time. So we went to True North in March, um, just a couple of months ago, and I did a 10-day fast. I couldn't do longer because I didn't. My weight was not. I was in the normal range at that point, and by the time 10 days were over, I was close to being underweight.
Hmm.
So uh, they had looked at me and said 10 days is probably all you can do, and it was. Um, and But that seems to have completely taken care of the brain fog. I I don't know about the fatigue yet because just fasting to that point, in terms of my body weight and everything, um, leaves my body with a kind of depletion of energy
Mm-hmm.
just because it takes some time to rebuild, the refeeding time after the fasting. And um, and they said it would be 2, 3, 4 months probably before I would really know what my energy is now. But I think it's 6 or 7 weeks now since that fast ended. I'm quite encouraged by the by the amount of energy I have, and I do not have brain fog. I still get very tired at night, um, and go to bed early, but I do not have the sense that I can't process things, that I can't hold a conversation, um, I never have a sense, no matter what I do on one day, that that I've that I've hurt myself the next day. That I don't have any carryover in terms of a malaise
Mm-hmm.
that I had before.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So what do you as you look back now? I know you're the journey is not over and we don't know where it's going, but as you look back
Mm-hmm.
now, like what are your takeaways?
Um, don't get COVID.
Yeah.
Although I did have a second bout of COVID, in early September, and that took me about 4 weeks to get over. But that did not seem to make anything worse.
Hmm.
But I did test positive for COVID. Um, the um, I think the wisdom that I gained from having a chronic illness is that one thing that I really did, I hope, learn is um, that my worth is in being a human being rather than a human doing.
Hmm.
Um, I there were long stretches in the past couple of years where I really couldn't do anything. I couldn't contribute to the housework. I couldn't really do. I do some volunteer work, especially with people who are considering cochlear implants, and and I couldn't do the kinds of things that gave my life meaning and purpose. Uh, and yet I'd wake up in the morning and say, yeah, there's still some reason I'm here, and I'm okay. Um, uh, I'm okay even if I'm not uh, producing anything.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's an important lesson, and not an easy lesson to learn, and it's not an easy lesson to keep hold of.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and I guess especially as being in a
the
service profession,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
where everybody else's needs.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, and I think, and that takes me to another thing, is paying attention to my own needs, and in a sense, following the instructions of the airline stewardess, and put my own mask on first.
Mm-hmm.
There's a there's a um, there's a sense in which we have to take care of ourselves first. Um, I've always seen that up until now as kind of an excuse for a lot of selfie survey
Yeah.
kind of kind of living. But in fact, if it's done for the right reasons, and and done with discernment, um, it it leads, you can't really treat other people any better than you treat yourself. And neglecting my own health, um, getting angry and frustrated with myself because I couldn't do things, just meant that I treated the people around me the same way.
Mm.
And and I really needed to learn, um, and I've needed to learn that for a long time. I've needed to learn how to be kinder to myself so that I can be kinder to others.
Mm.
Yeah. So that's a big reason
Wow.
yeah.
Well, I kind of have the impulse to leave it there. Let that be the thought
That sounds good to me.
the
Yeah.
listeners take
Yeah.
away. So yeah, yeah. I mean, got any plans or things, up as you look towards the future? Anything, you know, exciting or definite?
But that's another thing I've learned is at this point, I haven't been able to trust myself to say, I plan to do this particular thing on this particular day.
Mm.
Just recently, I've begun to do that. And it did take, for example, we had to get to California in order to get from New York City to California in order to go to True North. And then get back.
Hmm.
And that took a
And that
lot.
was driving, right?
But
Not flying.
yeah, we were driving exactly, and Jackie did all the driving, um, but uh, but it was that still took a lot. So I'm beginning to believe I can do some things, but I haven't really sat down and said, these are the things that I plan to do
Mm.
in the next 6 months,
Uh-huh.
or this is my bucket list, or whatever. In fact, letting go of that and just saying, okay, let's see how I am tomorrow. If I feel okay to do it, I'll do X. It doesn't mean I don't have some things that I'd like to do,
Hmm.
but it is I'm doing more writing, and I'm doing more walking, and more um, engaging with other people.
Hmm.
And right now, that's good stuff.
Right. Is any of your writing published, publicly available for folks, or is it all journal form right now?
No, I have a blog.
Oh,
Yeah,
willing to share that?
it's yeah. It's Fear Not Online, all one word, fearnotonline.org and .org, and it's I publish occasionally, and the focus of it has been I call it the third half of life, um, because we have uh, the people like me nowadays uh, are living. I mean, I've had my 70 um, years of life, and now I've got I'm in my 70s, so everything is kind of a third part of life, a third chapter, and I think a lot of us aren't even thinking about aging until we get almost to those years. And so anyway, a lot of it's about how do you live a full life and a meaningful life, um, at, after 60.
Hmm. Third half of life. I love that. I'm 2 years
Yeah.
away, so it's time to start thinking about it.
Okay.
So, kind of
Yeah.
hoping that I can learn these lessons through you and I don't have to learn them for myself.
I hope so. I hope so. I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I had my last church. I had so many people who were in their 80s and even in 90s. I said I had a postgraduate course in aging as a pastor
Mm,
in that church, and and many good examples, and also many examples of what not to do.
mm,
So that's
wow.
that was helpful to me.
Gotcha. Well, Roger, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story so openly and thoughtfully. Um,
Now, thank you so much for having me. This has been delightful. I always get so much out of having a conversation with you anyway.
well, thanks. So I'm gonna go finish up my stuff. So it's great catching up, great hearing this kind of leisurely full arc. There's a having talked to you for a long time now in these conversations, I'm surprised at how much I did not know. So I'm glad we kind of got to have a leisurely, expansive conversation.
Yeah, this has been great. Yeah, I loved doing this. Thank you.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
thanks again. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.